I'm going to talk about them from the perspective of both accounts, both knowledge and enterprise. We have participants on the call who represent both license types. And we're going to go in that order. So without further ado, let's take a look at tags. So the purpose of tags is to provide a user with a ability to categorize things kind of on the fly as you wish, and that's unique to your account. So it's a categorization feature. As a categorization feature, it's an attribute to definitions, specs, and collections. Those three objects use tags. Tags work the same no matter what license type you have. And there is a single set for all of those. So tags that you may use in definitions would also show up in the browse area for specifications and collections as well. It's all a single set of tags for your account across all three objects. It's only searchable from the definitions browse page. Tags are not searchable in specs or collections. It's not impacted by workflow. If you're familiar with the definition page or any of those pages, you'll remember that what's on the right-hand side of that divisional bar is typically not impacted by workflow, and tags are over there. So it's a little bit outside of your governance, your formal governance of your workflow. The act of adding a tag or removing a tag is recorded as a system event, and the tag travels with the version. So if you put a tag on something and then version it to version 2 or 3, that tag will travel along with it. Let's take a look at how clients use tags. I use this word ephemeral. Ephemeral means lasting for a short period of time, and they are at their best when that is how you use tags. As a classification tool, I flag two types of classification, or two purposes. One is operational, so that's a training episode, what I call small batch editing. If you are editing a subset of definitions, usually it's between like 8 and 10 definitions. Sometimes we call these rabbit holes. I had a client the other day, immediately I was explaining the concept of how definitions can be grouped and related to each other, and he immediately said, "Oh, you mean like a spider web?" So when you're working with a spider web grouping of definitions and you want to ensure editorial sameness or consistency across that set, it can be helpful to be able to pull up that set of definitions in Data Cookbook and then do your editing on that small batch. You can also, if you can retrieve it as a tag, you can export it. So that small batch grouping that you do, if you create a spider web of 10 definitions, you can easily export those 10 definitions, edit them externally, and then re-import them. So it's a nice categorization feature for operational purposes. For governance classification, examples there would be you wanted to flag definitions that are PII or for FERPA or HIPAA, etc. Another example is biographical demographic, biodemo. People will want to create a biodemo tag so that they could quickly retrieve all those demographic attributes of a student, perhaps, or of an employee. And you could use tag for that. I think there's pros and cons to it, and I don't have a preference of which way you go with that. The pro is that the tag is a browse feature, and you can retrieve, using a filter, all of the definitions that you've tagged with that. The con of that is that those things, particularly the PII, the FERPA, and the HIPAA, those are pretty serious governance flags. And as I mentioned earlier, tags are outside of the workflow. So if you have editor permissions to a functional area, you will be able to change tags and not trigger a workflow. So there's a little bit of a loss of control from a governance perspective. We have a feature called additional attributes. that allows you to create a custom field, and clients do use that. It'll be a checkbox field if this definition is falls under FERPA or falls under HIPAA, etc. And if it is, then you'll check that box. That's a more controlled way to flag those things. The downside of that is that additional attributes are not searchable or browsable. So it's challenging to quickly retrieve the definitions that have been given that flag. So there's pros and cons. But in general, the use of tags is for classification purposes that you can control. So let's take a look at a demo. So we're going to go into the enterprise level, and we're going to log in as username Dan, and he is responsible for doing a demo on quality later this month, and he wants to quickly retrieve the materials that he's going to use in Data Cookbook for that demo. So we're going to go here into the, this is my enterprise starting point. We're going to log in as Dan. And Dan is going to, actually a starting point for Dan could be under organization, tags. And that's the centralized place of all your tags. It's an inventory of all your tags. We have about seven or eight. And quality demo is one of those tags. This is the tag that Dan is interested in. At a glance, he sees that he's got 2 specs, 3 definitions in one collection that share that tag. So if he's trying to he's trying to build up examples for his demo and for his training, he can now quickly go to those 3 definitions that he wants to talk about in his demo, and there they are quickly available to him, right? They may not share, in this case, they do share functional area, but there's 70 definitions in that functional area, so it's a little bit of tricky to find something quickly, and he's able to locate these quickly because of his tag. So he navigated to that through that tags area. He could also notice how the filter area, it defaulted to quality demo, and there's the list of all the tags that are available in this account. GPA edits, I think there's 6 or 7 in that tag area as well. Notice that on this display, you see the tag will display there on the browse results list. Within a specific object, it does appear on the right-hand side in that area that is typically a little bit less governed. So there's the tags area, and you can see that this is an approved definition, but because Dan has editor permissions to the admissions functional area, he could change that tag, and it would not trigger a workflow. He could remove it, or he could add additional ones. All right, let me go back to my let's log in as, let's change the login for a minute, and let's log in as the, where's my mouse? There it is. Let's log in as registration. Reggie is our data steward for the enrollment functional area. And Reggie, as a data steward, he wants to edit the definitions that pertain to GPA. And he has, over the last couple of days or weeks, he's noticed that there's some inconsistencies in how those definitions are written, and he wants to look at the set and work with that from an editorial standpoint and make those definitions work well together as a group. So he's got some things tagged earlier, and he created a tag called GPA edits. So he's going to keep this cluster for maybe a month, while he works on these. He could export these, download definitions as CSV. That would extract just these 7. He could work with those offline, and when he's ready to bring them back in their new form, he could do that through the import. I'm going to take that tag off for a minute. So there's 7. Hold that thought. If he, under GPA, if he's trying to find all his definitions that have the word GPA in them, he does a search, and there's more than 7. I think there's 8. Yeah, there's 8. So to show you how to add, and here the GPA edits is there on the first 7, and when we get down here to the bottom, there's one more here that he missed. And so he's going to click on that definition and go over to the tags area, click on the pencil, and as soon as he types his second letter, he is prompted for pre-existing tags, and he picks his tag and says done. And now he's got that. And if he clicks on that tag, that'll take him to the list of now 8 definitions that have that tag associated with them. And just to illustrate here, if he goes to the applicant admitted conditional, because he has editor permissions to this, so he's not the moderator, he's not the data steward for admissions, but he has editor permissions for this, he could delete that. And that did not trigger a workflow change. I'm going to refresh the screen so that that yellow box goes away. At the bottom, I had talked earlier about the system events. So all this, you can see as I was working this up for today, his removing and adding and removing is tracked in the system events, and that's helpful. So there's no alert that the change was made. There is an audit trail that the change was made, but no one was alerted. Okay. The last use case I want to talk about for tags, let's say Reggie is also a trainer, and he is going to give a talk about synonyms, which is our next module. He would go to browse definitions, and if he wants to show some examples, it's hard to find synonyms in your data cookbook. You know, there's no filter by synonyms. So if he's gone through and painstakingly flagged a couple examples that use synonyms, and now again, just, you know, the couple keystrokes, he's got those examples available to him, which really expedites a training situation. I'm going to return to the PowerPoint slide for one more, couple more points about tags. You want to be mindful and communicate. You want to be intentional about what you do institutionally with tags, and you want to record that in your standards document or your guidelines for usage of data cookbook. I know all of you on the call have such a document, don't you? So you want to record what the permissible things are to do, or how your editors and moderators, et cetera, should approach tags. And you want to put that in writing. I think, so you want to document it. That's a paper thing, a word thing. You also, from a human standpoint, this first point, you want somebody to physically watch those tags and monitor those tags. So I recommend either your data stewards, that becomes something that they're expected to do, or if you have a single person who is looking at your content across the whole cookbook, I would say on a monthly basis, you want to, intentionally look at the tag list. Does it need a haircut? Does it need to be trimmed back? Are things no longer needed? And you can navigate over here to the tags area and kind of make that. If you're looking at this once a month, you would, kind of get a sense of what seems to be lingering on for whatever you decide is too long. Obviously, it's a very kind of manual, tedious way to monitor the content and the aging of tags, but I think it's important to keep that tag list vital and relevant, even though it is ephemeral in nature. I would monitor that so it doesn't get out of control. I think one last thing before we leave here that I didn't show you really well was under how that tag list is the same across all. I can't remember if I showed you this. See, it's the same list there. And so the quality things, we saw that Dan Helper had quality material across multiple objects. So there's the 2 that he had for his quality demo. So that's it on tags. I think next is synonyms. Yeah. Synonyms are the same for all license types. They only are part of definitions. Similar to tags, you can change them with editor permissions only. They do not disrupt the workflow or trigger a workflow. They are searchable, and they are also recorded as a system event. So let's talk about use cases. A first use case is it's used just like we use synonyms in regular English language. Sometimes we call it first year student, sometimes we call it freshman. Both terms are acceptable, so you want to be able to communicate that. Let's go to our list. The second use case is around acronyms. Let's go just dive into the cookbook and take a look at that. We're still logged in as Reggie. We're still in the enterprise account, but this would work for knowledge as well. Let's go over here back to browse definitions, and let's pick our synonym training to quickly bring up 3 examples of synonyms. So let's look at the first one. Here's first year student. Oh, actually, you see the synonym. I always forget. You see the synonym displayed right there below the definition label. It's also over here. There's our friend, the pencil, that communicates that there's editing allowed, even though this definition is approved. And there are system events. The synonym and the tags were done yesterday. When I said that they were available through search, by the 2 search areas I meant were the data cookbook area, we sometimes call this the mega search, and then the browse definition search also will retrieve those keywords. As a side note, we have a new appendix in the user's guide that is a chart that talks about what fields are indexed in these 2 different search boxes. They operate slightly differently. So we provided that information in a comprehensive way in the appendix of the latest version of the user's guide. Okay, so back to synonyms. Oh, let's talk about acronyms and abbreviations. That's where I wanted to go next. Let's go back to our list. So, okay, first year student and freshman, we get that. Let's talk about acronyms. So our recommendation is that you choose as your label whichever one is used and recognized by 80% of your data consumers. You don't go by what is used and recognized by your highly expert report writers. That is not your audience. Your audience is 80% of the average report consumer or data consumer. If they use and are very familiar with FTE instead of full-time equivalency, then you make FTE the label and the synonym is spelled out. In this instance, the reverse was felt to be true. 80% of the data users would rather see grade point average, and so the synonym GPA was used. It's a judgment call. It's a data steward call, I think. The data steward should know what the expertise level is of 80% of your average data consumer, and that is who you select the label for. We do not recommend you make a black and white rule in one direction or the other. Acronym is always used, spell out always in synonym, or vice versa. It tends to not be realistic of how 80% of your people would use it. Okay. I want to go back here. Oh, and don't use a synonym. Occasionally, I'll have clients who there's a word or a phrase that they want people to stop using, and they'll want to make it a synonym because they're trying to communicate that in lieu of that bad word or bad phrase, I want you to use this new label. Synonym is not going to communicate that. Synonym is communicating permission to use that word or phrase in lieu of your definition label. So if there's something that you do not want people to stop using, do not make it a synonym. You might want to call that out explicitly in the functional definition, or just leave it to verbal communication to clarify that that's not what you're supposed to use. Let's go over back to the enterprise. I think Reggie is still logged in. Yeah, Reggie is. Let me take the tag off, and I'm going to search for course number. And I'm going to add CRN to this as a synonym. Notice it's approved. Reggie has editorial permissions to the enrollment area. Synonym. Done. And then it's recorded. I think I have to refresh. It'll be recorded down here, the time and the person who made that change. There it is. So let's look at this just so that you really can believe me. Let's log in as a user called Connie Sumer. She's 80%. She's in the 80%. She's your average data user. She's your average data consumer. So she logs in and she does not have permissions to make any changes in Data Cookbook. She's a consumer. So let's see what course number looks like for her. So she sees it straight up and she cannot do anything. So that's how that works, the ability to change things as an editor outside of the governance process, or outside of the workflow process, rather. Okay, let's move on and talk about attachments. They are the most complicated of the three things today. Although I think tags are surprisingly complicated, but I think attachments are more feature complicated. So attachments. Attachments, these are, just think of regular attachments in your work life. Microsoft Office type documents, PDF documents, images, drawings, any visual thing that you can create or create a file for. Pretty much any format. I'm not going to split hairs, but the standard stuff it accepts. Adding and deleting an attachment is part of the workflow process. That is very governed. Keep in mind that every user sees every attachment. There are no secrets. So be mindful, confidential, private, restricted information is inappropriate for an attachment. Policies about those things obviously are appropriate, but actual content that has that categorization is inappropriate. And I've experimented around a little bit. I loaded a 100-page PDF, and it did take about 20 seconds to load, but it did load it. So it's most size documents it'll take. A little bit of differences between the two accounts. A little bit more feature set here with the enterprise level. You can add an attachment on the display tab at a specification. And you would use that to communicate how you want a report to look. And then in the data systems area, you have an area where you can attach documentation that's related to that data system. So let's take a look at, before we actually take a look, we're not going to go to demo first. Let's go to, let's talk about some use cases. So what are people putting in these attachments? Well, policy things or usage guidelines, either on the IT security side or on the business side. Just more things that you want to say about, even on the definition side, about usage for that item, and the functional definition just is not going to go far enough for you, and you just have some more things you want to say about it. Common to use it to do a snippet of a report header. If you want to just give people a visual of all the columns in a certain report. Just take a snippet of the header, not the data itself, just the header, and provide that as a convenience to your consumers, to consumer. Visuals, I've had a client there at their institution, their data consumers just really struggled with the difference between applicant status and application status. A lot of confusion around those values and which was which and what was what. And they just took a pencil, a pen, a Sharpie pen, and somebody drew a hierarchical diagram of it, and they created a PDF of that drawing, and they attached that to about 8 definitions, so that if somebody landed on one of those status values, they would have at their fingertips, kind of as a job aid, as an interpretive aid, a quick visual summary of the relationship of all those things. It would have been difficult to explain all that in a functional definition, so they felt the easiest thing to do was create a visual for it. And then last, in the knowledge accounts, there's a good use case because you don't have reference data lists, you don't have the quality module. We recommend you can attach a valid value list or a list of values as an attachment. And here's Dan. Dan is now in a knowledge account. And he, in his explorations, came across the definition for major. Oops. And as he was exploring that definition, he saw that there was a helpful sentence there, see list of majors as attachment. I think it can be a little quiet. And also, this is not labeled. You cannot label this valid value list. So it can be helpful to call it out in your functional definition as well. And here's the list. And it's, of course, appropriately versioned. Let's just open that up to simple PDF, etc. So it just can quickly put those valid values lists at the fingertips of a consumer. What was my other example? Oh, report header. Let's go to Dan is also looking at a report called Incoming Freshman Report. He doesn't have access to this report in this fictitious world, but he's curious about it. And he was the requester. Okay, so my person isn't really going to hold through there, my storytelling there, but let's say that he didn't have access to it, and he was curious about what it looked like. He would click on attachments, and there's a screenshot, and it's just a simple, it's over here, on my other monitor. It's just a screenshot that kind of shows, obviously very simple just for the illustration, but you could just see kind of at a glance, what does this report look like? So what does that do for Dan? Well, it might motivate him to really try and get access to it. That may just be the clincher he needs to pursue a little bit of hassle maybe in getting access. Might work conversely. He may not have access. He takes a look at this and he says, oh no, that's not going to work for me. I do not need to put myself through that hassle. So it's a courtesy. It can be part of the shopping experience, the exploration experience of someone who does not have access to it, to that particular object. Working in a different direction, let's go to the enterprise account. I'm going to go with Jill first. Jill's a little bit more in my storyline here. Jill is a requester, and she's got this report called Faculty Tenure Status, and she wants to, she's got a little drawing of how she wants that report to look, what she wants that layout to look like. Okay, here's the fictitious story. Her friend at some other school that she met at EduCause told her about a report that was helpful, and Jill's got a snippet of what that report looked like, of the header of that report from that other school. How's that for a storyline? And so Jill, in her, we're going to go back to our enterprise account. Jill, in her request, she wants to share that snippet with her report writer. Whoops. And say, you know, can you give me something that looks like this? So we got the spec is already in play. There was something about faculty, wasn't it? Faculty tenure status. So Jill is the requester, and on the display tab, so enterprise clients have this. She can, one of the modes, this is in the weeds about the display tab, we offer 3 display modes, and one of them lets you put a sample attachment in. Actually, that's the one that's selected. So she simply, just click attachment, choose a file. She would pick it up off of her own file space and attach that file. So it's a communication to the report builder for how you want the report to look. If she attaches it at this tab, it will also appear on this tab as well. So it'll double display. There's a couple other places. Well, I'll stop there. It'll double display. My other use case for attachments in the enterprise account is in data systems. So we're going to log in with, I always have to make sure I spell his name right. Nickles. His name is Tech Nichols, and he's the editor. He manages a couple data systems over here, and so he's going to go to Browse Data Systems, and he manages the documentation. So he doesn't have editor permissions to all of these data systems. He's got it for about half of them. One of them is My Student Information System, and you can see there's already a resource. So I think this is a little confusing. It's not called attachments, it's called resources. Getting started with Banner User's Guide, so that's the vendor provided documentation, but they popped a copy in there because they're centralizing. They wanted to centralize it, and here it is under resources. And under details, you can manage versions of it. So there's version 1, 8.5.2, version 1 in the cookbook, and you can just go to town there with all kinds of different documentation. That's vendor provided. There may be other doc written by the client, by the school, that they want to attach there, and you can attach that conveniently, just collate all that material at your data system level. And that is not a feature that's available to knowledge clients.